Hey guys, welcome back to OrmsTV. Now, over the last couple of months, Fuji has released a couple of cameras. There was the X-H2S, the X-H2, and now this, the new X-T5. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys, the X-H2S and the X-H2 didn't really tickle my fancy. It's not really the type of cameras that I'm into. But when they delivered this, the new X-T5, and I actually got a chance to go and shoot with it, well, that's a bit of a different story. Now, obviously getting an all-new Fuji X-T camera, the only real thing you can do with it is street photography, because that's kind of what it's designed for, in my opinion. So we took it out, we took some shots, and again, to nobody's surprise, pretty amazing. There isn't really anything negative to say about this camera, but I'll take you through some of the specs. Now, the X-T5 uses the exact same sensor as is in the X-H2. So that's that all new 40 megapixel sensor from them. It's backside illuminated. It's a pretty amazing sensor, and it is still the highest megapixel APS-C size sensor on the market. And that's saying something. And you can see from the images when you punch in, I mean, the quality is there. There's no two ways around it. It is a really impressive sensor. In the X-H2, I said that the sensor doesn't quite make sense to me. It's not quite where it should be. But I'm pretty sure that that was just a firmware thing at the time, because in this unit, a couple of months later, now that they've had some time to perfect it, that sensor really shines. Coupled with that sensor, we have Fuji's film simulation modes. Now, we all know these modes by now. You don't need me to run you through them. But the way that they work with that 40 megapixel sensor is phenomenal. The color rendition that you get, the manipulation that you get, and the detail that's retained is incredible. And I haven't seen anything quite like it from a Fuji up to this point. And that really kind of speaks to this little camera. But I'll get to more of that later. For now, some more specs. Now, you can run this unit at up to 15 frames per second in stills mode if you want to. You can also shoot video on here, obviously. So you can shoot up to 6.2K and also like a HQ 4K, which is downsampled from the 6.2K, but that is with a 1.23 times crop. You can do a full width 4K from it as well at up to 60 frames per second. And you have your admittedly amazing F-Log2 that you can shoot in. You can shoot 10-bit 422, and you can output all of that via the HDMI port to an external recorder. So while not a video monster, it's by no means a slouch. Now, with this camera's predecessor, the X-T4, Fuji got a lot of criticism for the way that they approached the design philosophy behind the camera. And a lot of that was aimed at the video features that were included within the X-T4. And for a lot of people, it felt like the video features took precedence over the stills capability of that camera. But Fuji listened, and they've separated their lineup. So now you have your X-H2S as your more video-focused unit. You have your X-H2 as kind of the real hybrid powerhouse, high megapixel, very good video capabilities in a more professional body. And then you have this unit, which with its retro design is actually a beautiful, beautiful camera. And they've gone back to a much more stills-only focused approach. So, gone is the fully articulating LCD. You have a traditional tilting LCD with the additional hinge that Fuji has become known for. And that's pretty amazing. It really lends itself to stills shooting and the composition involved therein. You also have all of your traditional dials. So you've got your shutter speed, your ISO, your compensation over here, and of course, most of their lenses has aperture control right on the lens. And that's amazing for a stills photographer because it speeds you up. It makes it faster and a lot more intuitive to get to grips with this. They've also retained a lot of other features that were taken out of the X-H2S and the X-H2. So your two dials that you have, front and back, they are clickable. And these buttons are assignable to pretty much anything. All the other buttons on the unit can also be customized. And you can set this thing up to exactly the way that you want to shoot. And that's important because we all shoot differently. And that's probably why some of the previous models didn't quite gel with me, because my shooting style just a little bit different to a lot of other people's, and this kind of feels perfect. In addition to that, you have their by now standard W235 battery. Very nice, plenty of shots on that per charge, no issues at all. You have two SD card slots. They are UHS 2 cards, so speed's not an issue. You can go nice and high on that. On the other side of the unit, you have your USB-C for charging or file transfer, HDMI over there, and you still have a mic input, but no headphones on this unit, and then a remote socket. So all in all, very familiar and a lot more like an X-T3 used to be as opposed to an X-T4. And I really like that. I enjoy the separation within their range now. I think that's heading in the right direction for Fuji. Now, in terms of the actual shooting experience with this camera, that's actually pretty straightforward. It's really, really good. No two ways around it. But I'll talk about the autofocus first. So there's no two ways around it. Fuji has been upping their autofocus game quite significantly. The X-H2S was at the time the best they'd had. The X-H2 was even better. And now in the X-T5, it's probably as good as it has ever been. So just to let you in, the way that I shoot with this camera, I set it to the full 425 autofocus points. I then go center point. I make it as small as humanly possible because I like to focus and then reframe. It's just the way I go about it, and works perfectly for that. The autofocus is fast, it snaps on, it sticks where you want it, no complaints. But what is quite nice and what I found works really well for me, you can enable the eye detect or face detect autofocus along with your spot focus. So what the camera then does is sort of in the vicinity of where your spot focus is, it looks for faces and eyes within that area. And man, that makes life easy. So you just kind of aim it roughly in the direction you want to be. You halfway press, it finds an eye, it locks on, it still allows me to reframe. It suits my shooting style absolutely to the T. It is almost perfect in that setup. Like I cannot stress it enough. But that's not the only way you can do it. You can set it up exactly how you want to be. You can do zone focusing, full frame width focus, however you want this unit set up, you can do that. And from that point on, the camera just gets out of your way and just allows you to shoot and enjoy the act of photography. Because once you have the menu tweaked a little bit the way that you want, and you have your autofocus set up and your image output quality, then you don't have to go into the menu again, because everything else is a physical dial. Everything from your shooting modes, whether you want to do HDR or single shot or continuous, is a dial. Stills and video is a dial. Your focus modes is a dial. And man, that makes a difference. In an era where menus have become just more and more complicated, the fact that you can kind of play with the menu once and then ignore it and just focus on shooting makes such a difference in this little camera. And that's quite an impressive feat for by all accounts, a little technological powerhouse. Now, when you're shooting with this unit, there's no getting around the fact that that 40 megapixel sensor delivers some phenomenal image quality. You'll see from the images we're showing you now, when you punch in, the detail is there. It is beautiful, it is crisp, it is exactly what you want from a little camera like that. Would it be better if you had a full frame camera? Yeah, probably, but then it would also be bigger and the lenses would be bigger. And that would detract from where this type of camera is aimed at. In my opinion, the perfect street photography, travel photography camera. It's ideal for that because it's not imposing. It just looks the part. And if you're going to stick with APS-C, then this 40 megapixel sensor is arguably the best APS-C sensor out there right now. There's nothing better. The quality that you get is unmatched within this kind of genre right now. So you get that sharpness, you get that image quality, you get the details out of it. No complaints there. Couple that with the film simulation modes that we've talked about already. You get the color exactly the way you want it. It's kind of just a really good camera. It might sound like I think this is pretty much the perfect camera, but the perfect camera doesn't exist. And for me, a big drawback in this specific unit is the grip. For my hands, this camera is simply too small. And I know, having a small camera is a benefit for the type of photography that this kind of camera is designed for. I get it. But I really would have liked a slightly beefier grip. So my pinky slips off the bottom and I can't quite get the purchase on this unit that I want, especially with where I want my thumb to be. Once I have my thumb in its position, I'm almost losing a second finger on the bottom here. And I just don't feel steady and secure enough with this grip. I know that's not going to be a problem for everybody, but for me, that is a drawback on this camera. The other thing that I would have liked to see is a higher resolution viewfinder. Other manufacturers are going crazy on viewfinder resolution, and coming off using those cameras, this viewfinder just isn't quite there for me. It's not quite bright enough and it's not quite crisp enough. Is it usable? Yes, perfectly usable. If you're not used to shooting on other cameras that admittedly cost significantly more, you're really not going to notice the viewfinder being slightly lower resolution. And the same is true of the screen. I think it's a 1.8 million dot screen if memory serves. And again, other manufacturers have superseded that. And I would like to see Fuji go in the same direction. If you're gonna make a camera that is designed specifically for photography, where you're kind of expected to use the viewfinder as your primary means of framing, bump it up a little bit. Just a little bit, Fuji. Other than that, yeah, it's pretty much the perfect camera. Now we know this was a really short review on the X-T5, and that's for a reason. All the tech in there is already in cameras that you've seen before. If you want to know more detail about the specifications within this camera, you can literally watch a video on the X-H2. It is exactly the same technology in there. But in the X-T5, in my opinion, and for the way that I shoot, that technology is implemented significantly better. And I know that's not true for everyone. I would argue that if you are a working professional photographer, then the way that the X-H2 is set up is probably better. In a lot of ways, in that environment, it'll serve you significantly better than what the X-T5 will. And I'm not saying that the X-T5 is not a camera that can be used by a full working professional photographer. You absolutely can. But I feel like where the X-T5 really shines is as that camera that you have on you all the time. Almost your second camera. The camera that you don't necessarily use in professional capacity, but the camera that you use for the things that you love to shoot. That camera that you have when you're walking around a city and you're just firing off some snaps, when you're out with friends, when you and your partner are at a wine farm and you're just having a good time. This is the camera that you want with you. And that's how I use this camera. And for that, it is just about perfect. It gets out of the way. It doesn't interfere. You turn the dials to the settings that you want, and you just do photography. And for that, this little X-T5, perfect.